trauma doesn't have to be what happened. Trauma can be what didn't happen, but was supposed to happen. People say, I didn't have any trauma. I never had a want for anything. We went to Disney every single year, blah, blah, blah. But then the deeper you go into the conversation, you hear, well, mom was really emotionally absent. Mom was an alcoholic. Dad was a workaholic. I kind of raised myself. I just had to kind of be the good girl. They'll say, well, I said it. Right. I'm just type A. I'm just tightly wound. I'm just wired this way. It's in my DNA. It's not. This is a survival tactic. And your body doesn't feel safe if it's in the survival tactic. So let's talk about what would be a lack of safety if you just showed up as you. Whatever your grandmother was experiencing, your mother inherited that gene expression, and that was passed down into your gene expression because your mother has all of her eggs when she's 4 months gestation. No one's broken. You've just adapted to life in a way that's no longer working for you. And that's okay.
All right. So Stacy, Uhrig, thank you so much for being here. It is such an honor and a pleasure. I have been waiting for months to have this conversation with you. I just think we're going to totally geek out on this topic of trauma and how it impacts our lives and especially our work lives. Because as you know, and I think the folks listening may know, that I've had a lifelong journey of figuring out my shit, for lack of a better, expression, and saying what's happening? Like, why am I feeling stuck? Why am I not getting where I want to be? Why am I never satisfied? Why am I never happy? Like, it can't just be everybody else, So let me just say thank you again for being here. And I know that you have such experience, not just lived experience, but trained experience about bringing these topics forward so that people can go on and show up in as their best selves and live their best life. So thank you so much.
Yeah. I'm excited.
So I know we're going to talk about your journey in this conversation, but I really want to start off today. And usually I start with that, but today I just feel like I want to jump right in and start with this idea of what is trauma and what are the misconceptions? Because I know you're a big myth buster about it.
I am a big myth buster, and there are a lot of misconceptions. So we'll start really simply with if you were to go into the Merriam-Webster's dictionary and look up the definition of trauma, what you're going to find is it says that it is a physical or emotional unhealed wound. Okay. I actually think it says physical or mental, but we can fill that in, right? Mental, psychological, emotional. And I think that that's a brilliant way. The Greek word for trauma is wound. So my belief is that when we have experiences that impact us and leave a wound, and that wound can be like a paper cut laceration you don't even know that you have. Trauma is the way that you are living to protect yourself from touching that wound. So people in the trauma space, you'll hear them say things like trauma is never the event. Trauma is the impact on your mental health, your psyche, your physical health. Some people will say trauma is not the event. It's the impact and the aftermath of the event. We can also hear things which are very confusing to people, like trauma doesn't have to be what happened. Trauma can be what didn't happen, but was supposed to happen. And when we hear that statement, what that really means, when we really break it down, is when we think of trauma, this is the myth busting, we think of big, egregious, aggressive, violent, abusive acts. I call them the 3 A's: abuse, aggression, and acts of violence. That's what we think of. And then we always know that there are other experiences like war, natural disasters that we can look at and say, wow, these people are going to be really impacted. When we say trauma is often what didn't happen, but was supposed to happen, we're then also talking about how we as human beings just have some really basic needs that are not always properly met. So we have really 3 fundamental layers of needs that need to be met: physiological, air, water, food, clothing on our back, roof over our head. The next level is safety and security. We need to know that the household that we're being raised in and developing in is safe and secure. And the third is love and belonging. I need to know that me just being me in all of me is just enough, that there's no shape shifting I need to do for you to accept me. And when we're raised by people that maybe have their own limitations and those needs can't be appropriately met, it shifts the way we see ourselves. And so when we talk about an unhealed wound, the unhealed wound can often be us showing up not as ourselves. So I see trauma as a lot of different layers, but I think the biggest myth is that you have to know that you had this big egregious thing that happened. And I think what messes people up is that the majority of people, that's not the experience they had. So they're confused. And so they say, well, I didn't have trauma. Like I've had people say, I didn't have any trauma. I never had a want for anything. We went to Disney every single year, blah, blah, blah. But then the deeper you go into the conversation, you hear, well, mom was really emotionally absent. Mom was an alcoholic. Dad was a workaholic. I kind of raised myself. I just had to kind of be the good girl, the perfect girl, the this girl, the that girl. But we had on the outside, everything looked fine. And there was no yelling. There was no screaming. There was no abuse or violence or aggression. So it gets confusing for the person.
Yes. And
so trauma is that unhealed wound, whatever it is.
Yes, and I have that same experience with so many people who say like, everything was good. I'm like, first of all, is there any childhood that's like, like,
yeah.
But I love, and for me, like a big aha in my life was this recognition of those little paper cuts that you're talking about that added up over years and years and years. And the other piece that I want to bring into this, and I'm not sure if you have, specific expertise in this arena, but there's also the idea of what your body goes through. Like, for example, for me, like I had, a dozen surgeries. I went under the knife. I went under anesthesia, right? And there was, of course, the anxiety beforehand. There was also the anxiety after, but I came to realize, right, that even though I was sedated, I was like, well, that's trauma to my body over and over and over again.
For sure. And look, the reality is when I really simplify understanding trauma, I will often say trauma is anything that leaves you feeling unseen, unheard, insignificant, unimportant, not safe, right? None of these things leave us feeling safe. And if you don't have agency over your body and you're kind of put into this paralyzed position, which is really what anesthesia does, right? It just shuts everything down. I'm sure there's a part of the body that doesn't feel safe. And then if we don't have the language to process it, right? So look, here's the reality. We can all go through, like you were like, well, doesn't everybody have experiences? Yes, we all have experiences. It becomes trauma when we don't process it. So there's a great book called What Happened to You. Fantastic. One of the best books I've ever read to understand trauma. What Happened to You is the name of the book, but many trauma specialists will tell you the better title would have been What Happened to You and Who Could You Go To?
Right. Yeah.
So when we talk about these experiences like you had, when they're pre-verbal, we don't know how to share how scary something was.
Right.
Right. So if you had surgeries before you say you were 2 or 3 years old, that would be really scary because we can't process our feelings. If we are verbal, but we don't have the language for something, it also makes it very challenging. And the third layer of that is we actually are verbal. We actually do have the language. We have the courage to express it. And it's met with, you shouldn't feel that way.
Right.
Or don't feel that way. Or let's just find the happy in that. Or we don't want to focus on that. We don't want to focus on the bad. Let's just divert or not address. And so again, it goes unhealed. And so I can imagine in your scenario where you're talking about how many surgeries before you were 20?
Yeah, like a dozen. Mm-hmm.
Like a dozen. That's what I thought. How are we processing? A, I don't want to do this. B, I'm angry that I have to do this. C, I'm scared. I don't like being in that. Now we're pulling ourselves out of the anesthesia, putting ourselves in the anesthesia. Always this wondering and waiting, am I safe? And we're also very good at sensing other people's emotions. So we're watching mom and dad. How are they feeling about this? What is going on there? So it's a complex situation where you're not just addressing your own needs or not addressing your own needs, but you also, sometimes we feel burdened with the responsibility to make sure everybody else is okay with the fact that I have to go through this too.
And I want to highlight too, right? I'm sharing my example in hopes that those watching or listening can start to identify, oh, what have I been through that maybe I've diminished or haven't recognized? Oh, I really haven't processed that,
Right.
And it might be something like even, having braces, which is also something I had for, over a decade. And so to really sit and say, right, what have I experienced that maybe I haven't fully processed or maybe even haven't considered is showing up right now in the choices that I'm making or how I'm living my life. And I want to, first of all, this is so rich. Like I'm already like, oh my gosh, for those listening, you're going to probably want to listen again, right? Because you shared so much about how you start to identify these things. And I know you have a questionnaire that will definitely link in the show notes, but tell us a little bit about this questionnaire that you have and what its intent is for as this first tool I want to tell people about.
That's a good question. So the name of the assessment is called the HURT assessment, HURRT. And HURT stands for Healing Unresolved Roots of Trauma. And it all came out of this concept that back in the 90s, the CDC partnered up with Kaiser Permanente, which is the largest healthcare system on the West Coast. And what they were looking for, what they were trying to identify is there a correlation between people who come into either clinics or hospital settings with specific ailments that maybe had specific lived experiences? So they were looking for non-medical reasons that somebody might have a medical challenge. And they came up with 10 questions. So anybody that ended up in an ER setting or a free clinic was given this survey. And they were given 10 questions. And the 10 questions were things like, were your parents ever divorced? Did you ever have a parent that was imprisoned? Did you ever have a parent who you were abandoned by way of divorce or imprisonment or death? Did you ever have a parent or caretaker who was primarily responsible for you, but was under the influence and it left you feeling unsafe? Did you ever witness physical violence? Were you ever afraid that physical violence was going to be brought onto you? So there were these 10 questions, and they were able to correlate and say people who had scores, it was a score of 0 to 10. They had a score of 2 or more. So just 2 or more, they were higher rates of issues with your lungs, issues with your heart, autoimmune. If you had a score of 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever above, it increased, okay? Which we can talk about later because I have a score of 4 or 5 depending on, and I've had 3 autoimmune condition diagnoses over my lifetime, which is not lost on me. But there was a lot missing from the ACEs during that time. There were no questions about being a part of a group that was maybe marginalized. There were no questions about emotional neglect. So living in a household where maybe you didn't have divorce or a parent in jail or a parent that was abusing substances, but that parent wasn't emotionally available. So over the years, I've learned working with my clients, I would put in my own survey into my intake form. I was seeing a lot of the same things. So over a 1.5 year period, I started culminating things I was seeing and asking questions. And I created the survey, and it's broken down into sections. One has to do with kind of more of that ACEs, but it's expanded from the 10. There's a question on emotional neglect. There are questions about marginalization or feeling other than. And then in the back end, which is also missing from ACEs, is what I call the resilience scoring. So who could you go to? Did you have a community center? Did you have a family member? Did you have a teacher? Did you have one person you could connect with and share what's going on? And then now also I've just added all of those questions are before you're 18. I've added a 5th section of since that time, have you taken any steps towards understanding this, healing that? The resilience and the back end steps that you've taken kind of are the antithesis to the things that happen. So if you get a point for every issue that you checked off, you get a minus point for anything you've done to kind of tip the balance the other way. So you get this weighted score. When somebody takes the test, they get an analysis. It shows what all of the tiers are, and then it shows what tier you're in. And then over a course of 7 days, I'm sending you emails of things that you could try to do depending on your score to try to learn a little bit more about yourself. The purpose of the assessment is my mantra, which is I do not believe we can heal things we don't understand. We cannot heal what we don't understand. And in order to understand why you might be stuck, because maybe you didn't have that big, egregious, bold, quote unquote, trauma, here's some insight to the things I listed here. They matter. They matter to how you see yourself. They matter to how you're navigating the world. And it might just be these things that are actually what's keeping you stuck. So we're just starting to identify some qualifiers. And then if we end up working together, you take a course or you read a book or whatever it is, you just have a little bit of a different view of which to say, oh, I guess I was impacted by that. And it probably did leave a paper cut or 10. And I can still go in and heal those paper cuts.
And I am so glad. This is such a beautiful survey for anybody listening or watching. Highly recommend you take this assessment. I did it myself. I also received the email support. And I think that if nothing else, right? Naming things, feeling seen, if you do nothing else with it, which I really hope you do something with it. But when you find out, hey, what might be under the surface, but that it's just such a beautiful tool that like, to your point, can help you in that very first step of getting unstuck, because you can actually acknowledge and see that maybe there's something that hasn't been fully processed, hasn't really been explored, hasn't been honored as your lived experience. That was a challenge.
And I would love to just point out, I am not the end all be all knowing of all things. We're all just doing our best. So when you took that assessment and you had the courage to come to me and say, and I probably said, like, if you see anything, let me know. You came back and said, hey, some of my lived experience isn't qualified here. And I said, could you go back and give me some language that you feel would be valuable? And I added things into the survey and we adjusted the scoring accordingly. Same with that back end piece of what have you done so far? That came from one of my supervisors. They're like, this is great, but this would be even better if we could get this stuff in. I'm so open to making these adjustments because it's not about what I think should be in the survey. It's what has been the lived experience of the general public that I want to help capture. And I just so appreciated that you were willing to share with me that there was something missing, because since that time, people have taken the assessment and I've seen them check off the suggestions that you gave me. So I love the fact that they could see themselves also represented in the survey. So I really appreciate
I love that. You're doing this work. It's so purpose driven, and it's so to be able to open up and say, hey, what feedback do you have? It's just, you put the ego down, you say, I don't have all the answers. And of course, I think you and I are very simpatico in terms of we have our view, we have our experience, but we could never know everything in this space.
No way.
But hopefully, and I already know it should be true. I have to hope that because we get on stages like this, because we talk about it, we open the door for other people to talk about it, for them to see themselves more clearly. And so I'm grateful to you for being open and just saying, yeah, like, here's an opportunity. How can we help more people be seen, in their experience?
Yeah.
And there's also the unseen, which is the stuff that comes to us before we got here, like, whatever your beliefs are about this, I don't know what's right or wrong. Personally, I feel like there's things that get passed down, are like the DNA, like physically, right? Like all of that gets, and there's trauma even that gets passed down that doesn't get part of our lived experience. So I'd love for you to share, like, okay, what is generational trauma? And what does that mean in terms of how we then say, oh, how is this impacting me now? And what can I do about it? Or what needs to be healed, that maybe that's a lineage thing, not even like my lived experience thing.
Yeah. I mean, this is an area of fascination for me. I'm so obsessed with understanding intergenerational trauma because I think no puzzle of a person can be put together without taking this into account. So before I even share all of that, I just want to give out a resource. There is a phenomenal book called Break the Cycle. And it is written by Dr. Marielle Bouquet. It's Buque. Just came out in 2024. And it's Understanding Intergenerational Trauma. And I ate that book up so quickly. And a part of what I loved about the book is it really used my language that I use with my clients to simplify and get people to understand. So that's one of the reasons I love it, is because I know people can read it and understand it. She just gives so many great examples that I think are global, that will allow people to feel seen,
and I'll
heard,
put that in the show notes too. So for folks who weren't able to scribble that down, check the show notes out. Yeah.
Break the Cycle, Dr. Marielle Bouquet. Excellent book. And here's the reality. When we are born, we are given to people to raise us. That's very, very simple. And there's just kind of this like assumption among the child that if you've chosen to have me, you know exactly what to do. And that is such a misnomer. So, when we talk about generational trauma, what we're really talking about is everybody's unhealed wounds. Are we seeing life through unhealed experiences? Are we parenting through unhealed experiences? So when we talk about intergenerational trauma, there's a lot of different key aspects. A is, how is that person able to show up for me so I can be me? Number one. Number two, what I'll say is, what unwritten rules and unspoken contracts have been passed down from generation to generation. That often sounds like that's just the way we do things, or our family does X. So it's either explicitly said or it's just inherently understood. And we know this. Oh, we just all know, even though it's never been told to us, we're supposed to be this way. We're supposed to show up this way. This is appropriate. This is not. And we see it in the simplest of things. Okay. And also in the biggest of things. Can you give some
examples? Yeah.
So a simple thing could be like, this is the way we make mac and cheese.
Yeah.
I'm just using that as a stupid example. Versus, this is the way we believe something. To our family is a Steelers family. And if you don't like the Steelers, you're a traitor. I mean, I'm just using the most benign things, but like, this is actually legit stuff that people have to deal with, right? I see it get complicated when people get married and we have these unspoken rules and these unwritten contracts of, well, you're supposed to have holidays with me. You're supposed to bend over and everything comes back here. So it's all these little nuancy things, unwritten rules.
Can I ask you about
contracts?
Even the spoken contracts? Because I interact and work with so many folks, whether it's first generation immigrants or, what have you, where there's expectations that you're going to be in these three fields. And if you're not, you're going to be shamed, or you're going to be like, you're going to be like driven to do those things, even if you don't want to. Like, if it's not, yeah, like, yeah. So it's in those cases, it's spoken. And I think a lot of people dismiss it as, well, this is what it is, right? Like this is, because so many people have that experience, then it becomes normalized versus what is this really, how has this impacted you, and how has it impacted the way you make decisions and the way you show up, and even the way that you give yourself permission to honor what you want and what you need.
Yeah, it's all of that. Yes. I read another great book, you guys. I'm like always about the books here, called The Bully Market. And it's written by a gal named Jamie Fiore Higgins, who happens to just be someone my kids go to school with, her kids, right? So she's in my town, but she was a partner at Goldman Sachs. She made it all the way up to that level as a woman, which you know at a Goldman Sachs would be so challenging. Only 1% get to managing partner. You're not doing that as a woman. So it's like the 1% of the 1%. And she had no, there was no, what's the word I'm looking for? There was no nepotism. Nobody in her family, like there was no in for her. Okay. She was first generation here. Now, it's really important to understand intergenerational trauma your parents could have come here on the freaking Mayflower. Like you don't have to be first generation here. Okay. But in her case, she was first generation here. And there was an understanding, just this blatant understanding, whether directly and explicitly said or not, of that your generation must do better than our generation. No pressure, but you must do better. And what she was making in a year was more than what her entire family had ever made in a lifetime. So even though she was absolutely dying at that job, for a variety of reasons, which is why you should read the book. It's so salacious. It's so good. But she felt this internal pressure of, I'm going to let everyone down. My family will be so disappointed. I'm the one that's supposed to break this cycle of paycheck to paycheck. I'm the one that my generation's supposed to be the one that's doing better. So we get landlocked into these belief systems, right? So that's one type of generational trauma because they're leaving several wounds. We're not accessing ourself. We're not making decisions from our alignment or from ourself. We're doing it based on what we think will make everybody happy with us. So that means that there's a piece of us that doesn't think when we show up as just us, it's enough. On the other side is what you described earlier, which is epigenetics. And I will very clearly state, I am no expert in epigenetics. I just know enough to be able to explain it to you so you can go further research it and find somebody that's an expert in epigenetics. But it's important for people to just be aware, and that's my goal, is to generate the awareness that epigenetics is a thing and it exists. And really what it means is that trauma and the way that we manage stress can influence the genetic expression. Okay. So it can influence the gene expression of someone, and that gets passed down. And the typical analogy that is often used, it's called the three women or the three mothers. So the studies show, and I have another good book for this, by the way.
Give it to us. Don't hold back.
Always. It's called It Didn't Start With You. It's by a guy named Mark Wolin. I'm going to send all of this to Tosca so she can put it in the show notes. He does a great job of sharing the research data around this concept. Okay. The idea behind it is, and I'll use you as an example, when your mother's mother, so I want you to think about your maternal grandmother, when she was 4 months pregnant with your mother, when your mother was 4 months gestation, your mother had all the eggs that she would need in order to create. So whatever your grandmother was experiencing was in your eggs, which means you carry that into your gene expression. So whatever your grandmother was experiencing, Your mother inherited that gene expression, and that was passed down into your gene expression because your mother has all of her eggs when she's 4 months gestation. So think about this. Okay. I was working with this really brilliant client the other day, young guy in college, and I mentioned if we go back 7 generations, which is what Dr. Bouquet talks about in her book, that we carry 7 generations of all of this. He's like, that's 500 years. I'm like, thank you for doing the math for me.
Yeah.
But I knew 4 generations went back to the early 1800s because I knew my great grandmother. That's 4 generations. So I'm 1, my mom's 2, my grandmother's 3, my great grandmother's 4. My great grandmother was born in the late 1880s, early 1890s. And I watched her grow with what was happening in and around her in the world. But life was very challenging for most people in the late 1800s. It was a very physical life. We didn't have a lot of our modern industrialization. So we had to find ways to survive. And we're finding our food. We're cooking our own food. We're cutting the neck off of our own turkey. We're plucking it. I mean, the stories I would hear we don't have modern day refrigeration. Things are going in a creek. You're going and getting eggs from the hen every day. Like life was very different. Yeah. I'm just using my own personal example. I'm thinking, okay, if my grandmother raised, so this is the other side of the generational trauma. If my grandmother raised my mother, that's going to influence how my mother raised me. If my grandmother is going to be influenced by my great-great-grandmother. Because remember, if my great-great-grandmother is pregnant with my great-grandmother who has my grandmother's eggs, now I'm going into the mid-1800s. Like, let's just say it's really upper. It's like 1860s, let's just say. What's my great-great-grandmother experiencing in West Virginia trying to live? How is that influencing my great-grandmother? And my grandmother, which influences the way my mother's raising her children. Like it just cannot be taken out of the equation. So another great example of that is we see around the world, you use the example of India. Well, I'm assuming it was India. We're talking about like 3 different kinds of jobs you can have that would be acceptable. But we see different pockets of information in different areas. So I happen, for whatever reason, to work with a lot of clients that are first generation Portuguese. Don't know why. Just keeps happening. None of them know each other. It's not like it's a referral thing. I'll take it. It's fascinating to me. But I've learned to ask this question, especially when I know that my clients' parents never left Portugal. The question I ask is, how many years of education do your parents have? And they always laugh. Because they're like, how did you know to ask? Because it's a very agricultural country. And in every case, it's, they finished 4th grade. They finished 5th grade. They finished 8th grade. I'm the only person to have ever finished high school, let alone go to college. So then we talk about that. You don't understand why your parents don't understand the way you're living. But let's talk about the survival mode they had to go into at 9 years old when we're in 4th grade. With you can no longer be socializing and be going to school and doing the things that would be developmentally normal for a child to learn. Because you have the burden and the pressure of having to bring in money for the family.
So all of these things, right? I just want to move in the direction of, okay, there's things that have happened, and how do we start to see and awaken to how this is impacting me in my daily life? And I know and we're going to get to also, and how do we start to do the processing, do the healing, and uncover a more deeper understanding of who we are at that soul, spirit, essence level, however you define it, so that we are operating not from how our survival tactics, but from that core of who we are. But what's your perspective? Because I have my own perspective and process, with clients about how do you help people to see, okay, like, these are the patterns that are showing up. This is actually hurting you, not helping you, because I think a lot of people just don't see it because they're in
Yeah. Well,
automatic mode.
I have a really great way for them to see it. So I'm trained in something known as a genogram.
No.
Are you familiar with what a genogram is? Oh, it's so awesome. And I can do it online or in person. And if you come to me in person, I have big swaths of paper with markers and crayons, and we can get really fun with it if we want to. A genogram is a family tree, but a genogram is unique because it has a very specific legend and a key of connectors that show family dynamics and interrelational dynamics. And what I ask my client to try to do is to go 3 generations. So you, your parents, your grandparents. And we're trying to understand by visually drawing out very specific types of lines and very specific types of colors so we can designate what the relationship was between our grandparents and their children. What do we know about the stressors that they had? How did they deal with those things? A lot of times we're seeing things like, well, there was alcoholism there, or there was a mental health issue there, or this was this, or this was that. When we are finished building out this genogram, every client will say the same thing. Oh my God, this was going to happen. Like, I can see it now. This obviously did not start with me. And what's really interesting, and this is something I work a lot on with, is if that person say there was abuse. Okay. Say there was, I hate the term big T, little t, but I'm just going to use it for the sake of this. Let's just say there was a big T trauma. Okay. Because I think trauma is trauma. And you see it and say that you received that at the hands of a parent, but you can see what your parent received by way of the genogram. It's never going to excuse the behavior. It is never okay to be abused. We will never find a reason to excuse that. But boy, does it explain a lot. So we get into this duality of compassion for what the person went through, but also accepting it was not okay that it still came down to me. That's a tough area to work in, but it's an important area to work in. Because what happens is when we are in the hand of abuse at someone else, we internalize it and we have to make the decision that it is because of us before the age of 10. It's the only rational thing we can come up with because we cannot allow ourselves to believe the person who is in charge of me is hurting me for any other reason that they are having a problem, because I need to know they're solid.
Yeah.
So then I have to be the problem. This is part of our it's part of our development. We have to accept responsibility. At a certain age, we don't have the processing power to be able to say, oh, that person's carrying their own shit. Oh, that person has their own limitations. We can't do that yet. When we're able to see it, because that wound lives with us for a long time. Well, maybe if I was just a better kid, maybe if I wasn't so hyperactive, maybe if I wasn't so sassy, maybe if I wasn't X, we carry that. When they can see it, they go, it wasn't actually me. We need this understanding in order to start the healing. So to answer your question, how do we see it? I've physically have them draw it out. The genogram is a beautiful tool. Anybody can research genogram. It's GENO-gram online. And the keys are out there. The tools are out there. It's all for anyone to figure out. It's just a really beautiful way to start to gain that curiosity and gain that awareness. And then it's a data point. What are we now doing with this data? How have I been living my life? And now I have a different understanding, so I can actually live it through a different understanding as well.
Yeah, I love these tools that you're bringing up and bringing awareness to, because there's a lot of different ways that we, I think, find our way through the processing. And a lot of times when I'm working with people, and we discover behaviors, or we discover thought patterns, or what have you, there's an inherent desire to know why with a lot of folks. And I also believe, I think, look, yes, there is power in the origin, there is power in understanding, but I also don't think that's required to move forward differently in your life. Cause I like to, I definitely want to make that point, because not everybody has access to all the history or what, all those things. And,
That's true.
And to me, the work is very forward looking. It's very like really looking at what you're doing, and whether or not you understand why, making those choices about what you want to do differently and how you take care of yourself in the process of doing things differently, so that you can get different results. So I'd love to, for, in your experience, and maybe it's your personal experience, maybe it's with your clients, but like, how does this show up in work environments where we're feeling stuck or we're not getting where we want to be? And so much of that why is because there's stuff that we haven't processed. Like, what are some examples of what that might look like at work?
Yeah. So the way I see it all kind of coming together, like the culmination of it all, is when we have learned that we cannot be ourselves in a scenario where the way we think or the way we show up or the things we want to do are just simply not enough. It's so hard to process, because we do need this connection and we're afraid not to have this connection. So we shapeshift. And when we shapeshift, in my opinion, this is when our parts really activate. So you and I have talked about parts work before. I'm a parts work practitioner. I truly believe that we all have a self, but I also believe that that self is shadowed out very often by our parts, and that our parts become bigger and bolder and more present in our everyday life than we do.
Yeah. And just for those, and I want to just add there, right, for folks who are familiar with, how I talk about inner critics, I talk about inner critics as being a part of who we are. So I just want to bring that language into the fold too. I know you don't use inner critic language, but we have multiple parts. We have inner critics, we have cheerleaders, we have all kinds of things, right? Sorry, I just want to bring that in.
No, that's good. So, if we become more parts led than self led, and people will say things like, I don't even recognize myself. I don't even know who I am. That's really good language to start to get curious, to go, oh, well, I'm not being self led because I don't know me. That's an indicator we're more parts led in that moment. So when we become more parts led than self led, which is what happens for most people, and we get into the school environment, we get into the work environment, we start to deprioritize ourselves. We deprioritize our needs to meet the needs of other people for connection. Because connection, when we're connected, when we're a part of a group, when we're part of the whole, when we're part of the collective, not on the outside, but on the inside, that registers as safety inside the nervous system. When we are not part of the collective, when we feel like we might not be liked, when we feel like there could be a disconnection, that feels like a lack of safety in our nervous system. And when we have a lack of safety, we get dysregulated because we must take action when we're not safe. So we either hyper arouse and get really anxious and really, overwhelmed and stressed and have a lot of different behaviors that show up with that, or we get hypo aroused, which looks like procrastination, lethargy, fatigue, apathy, just complete shutdown. When we're in that zone, it's going to impact how we're at work. So either on the hyper aroused side, we're showing up as the extreme people pleaser, the no boundary setter, the give it all to me and I'll get it done perfectly, even if I'm burning out by doing it. That's the hyper side. The hypo side is, I don't know how to get started. I feel completely paralyzed. I am not motivated. I can't even create a task list. And if I did create a task list, I can't even really stick with it. I'm completely blind to time. I'm overwhelmed. by how much I think something is going to take. So we get into these two extremes, which are dysregulated states in the nervous system science. A regulated state would be, I feel calm, cool, collected. And even if I don't know how to do something or how to approach something, because I know I'm enough and I'm just going to figure it out. But when we're in these other states, we're in a survival state. We can't thrive in those states. So part of it is starting to recognize, oh my God, I'm always in survival, which was me. I was in survival from 12 to 42, 2 nervous breakdowns and all that. You have to be able to recognize it. I would not have been able to recognize it because it was my normal state.
That's the thing, right? Because I think there's probably people listening, watching right now that are like, that's who I am, right? That's this.
But that's not normal. And that's the thing. That's what they'll say. They'll say, well, I said it. I'm just type A. I'm just tightly wound. I'm just wired this way. It's in my DNA. And my belief system in the work that I do is, I call bullshit. I say it's not. This is a survival tactic. And your body doesn't feel safe if it's in the survival tactic. So let's talk about what would be a lack of safety if you just showed up as you. If you said, I don't know how to do that. Or I'm sorry, I'd love to be able to help you with that, but I'm already burdened by my workload and I can't take that on. Or I feel, you see where I'm going with that?
There's going to be folks that have a lot on their plate, right? So let me just throw that scenario. Okay. I'm a single mother. I've got 2 kids. I've got a business or I've got a job. Right. I caretake, add on the things, right?
So we're in deep survival.
Right. And what's the way in to showing that there is another way of being, right? When it's like, but how can any of this stuff drop? How can any of this come off my plate? Like, what would you say to that person who's listening that's like, yeah, exactly. This is the way my life has to be.
Okay. So sometimes things can't come off of our plate. That's the reality of the situation. You just painted a perfect scenario. We'll use this as the example. A single mom with a few children. She might be working more than one job. She also maybe is caretaking for a parent. She's not being paid well, so she's already stressed financially. Like, that's a real scenario for a lot of people. We cannot always change the environment. We can change the way that we are working within the environment. We can change the way that we're working within our circumstance. There are pockets of places that we can start to prioritize ourselves. This pocket could exist while you're in the shower. This pocket might exist while you're brushing your teeth. This pocket might exist when you're on your commute, whether you're on a bus, a train, a car, or you're walking to work. There will be a pocket. This pocket could exist when your child is quietly playing for 2 minutes, right? So and I'm going to use the term self-care. It gets like overused sometimes because people don't really understand what it is. They think it means that you're going out and doing something for yourself.
Course, it gets misconstrued.
But self-care is when we care about ourselves. It's when we care about our needs. When we're in that survival mode, we'll often hear things like, I don't have the luxury to take care of myself. Or I don't even know what I want. I don't need anything.
And I want to highlight too what you're saying.
Go ahead.
Because, oh my gosh, Stacey, I just, like I said, I knew this was just going to be the total geek out. But I want to slow down what you're saying because we live, I think, in a world right now that is very all or nothing, that is very binary. So it's like, if I can't go and take 3 months off of my life, then I have nothing. I have no choices. And what I hear you say, you can tell me if I'm getting it wrong, but it's also part of the practice, that I do, right? Which is like micro steps. micro act like that. These
Steps.
do matter. These do lead us to new destinations, new places, new ways of being. And part of it is I think helping people understand it is enough. That 2 minutes is enough. Give yourself, see what's possible, see what happens when you give that to yourself. Is this also, am I landing it or?
Yeah. And what's coming to my head also is this is where a micro-focused gratitude practice can really come into. So, for example, I went through an experience in my early 40s that was incredibly, incredibly stressful. There was no way for me to remove myself from this circumstance. I was just going to have to figure out a way to survive the circumstance. Plain and simple. And part of it was financial. Okay. So my husband and I owned a business with my brother and my dad that was a very successful business for many years until Lehman Brothers closed. Eventually, the best way for me to put it is our business became collateral damage of the fallout from the market. There was nothing we could really do to stop that fallout, but we tried. And it was like a 3-year death spiral. And at some point, you just had to say, there's no options left. We turned every dial. The only option left is to actually close the business. But it was going to force us to close it under duress. And so every penny I owned, I had put into that business with the assumption I would get it back. I had decimated my 401k. I pulled every dollar I could off the top of my house. Every penny I had in savings was gone. So when the business closed and when we were saying all of our chips are in, we have no option but to make this work. And then come to the realization, doesn't matter what we do, it's not going to work. So everything we just also put in is going to be a loss. And I'm now starting from scratch, zero, legitimately. Like actually 500, I had $500 in the bank for a family of 4, 30 miles outside of Manhattan. Yeah. That's pretty scary shit. Like, I don't know how I'm going to make my mortgage. And my husband and I were like very, very like really responsible people, very financially responsible. We've never carried a debt on anything other than a mortgage. Always paid off our college debt as soon as we could. Didn't have any debts on cars, like never had a credit card debt a day in our life. Like we were so responsible financially, but we had put all this money we didn't have into this business because it's your baby. You're just trying to keep it alive. And now you're realizing it's all gone. And I'm never going to get it back. And we have to close the doors. And that's going to cause more financial wreckage. I had 60 employees at its height, 16,000 square feet. I had grade B space. I had a $10 million lease with Mac Cali. Like when you're closing, it's not just you're closing. It's you've got a lot of outstanding, like, oh shit. It's like, are they going to come after me for that $10 million unused lease? Are these people going to come after me because I couldn't do this, that, the other thing? So it was very, very, very stressful time. And I was being served with a lot of papers, a lot. And I was in such deep anxiety. I could not breathe. I was in multiple days of panic attacks at a time. And I had a 3-year-old and a 9-year-old, like a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old. And my husband worked for me. So every egg was in the same basket. So if that business closed, when that business closed, he was also out of work.
Man, this is like DEFCON. If there's like a DEFCON 11, this was,
it was like DEFCON 10. Like, it was awful.
That's insane.
It was awful. It was awful. And, I just look every day, every November, I look at my husband and I go, I cannot believe where we were 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 13 years. It's like shocking to me how far we've come. But the reality is I was shattered from the inside out. When I say I had no sense of safety because I had no money and I didn't realize so much of my safety was rooted in at least being able to make my bills. And I knew who I owed and I knew what I owed. So it wasn't just what I lost. I still was going to owe like hundreds of thousands of dollars in debts to other people having to do with the business, the IRS, whomever, that I wasn't going to have that money for a long time. Because I was just going to be paycheck to paycheck for years until we paid off the home equity loan that we borrowed from to
So
make
how did you even, where do you start? You're like at the bottom of the bottom of the bottom and you have kids
I was
to
at the
take
bottom
care
of the barrel. Right. And so the only thing I had was what was inside of me. What I realized in that experience is that I put so much value and weight on external power and external forces. And actually, I just needed to really look inward and see what I had from within, because that actually could never be taken from me. So I started this micro gratitude process, and it looked something like this. Every single morning that I woke up, before I even opened my eyes, I just said thank you in my head for even just waking up. When I would hear my kids starting to move and starting to wrestle, and because I have 2 boys, and starting to make chaos, I would quickly just in my head say, thank you so much that they have the ability to do that. That they have the ability to get up out of bed by themselves, and that they can move the way that they're moving, and they have the voice and they have the creativity and they have these things. I would get my legs over the bed and thank myself for being able to move my legs over the side of my bed. I would stand up. I would say thank you to myself. Every step I walked to the bathroom, I was saying thank you for this step.
Where did
sitting
this
down
come
on
from?
the toilet.
Like the gratitude as you're, it came, you listened to yourself and said, what do I,
I was
amazing.
Craving for anything.
Yeah.
It just came to me. Every single step I took, every single breath I took, I was saying thank you after it. Every movement, opening a drawer, taking out a fork, every single thing.
Yeah. And
thank you. And
no,
then,
sorry, wait. Yeah.
I want to just tell you the rest of this. I set up my phone because this is something anybody can do. Because I had no money. I could not go to a therapist. I could not go. There was no YouTube. There was no Instagram. There were no reels. I could either read a book, and that was it. The stuff did not exist in 2012. I took my phone and I put an alarm for every hour from 7 a.m. until 10 p.m. Every hour. There were like 13 alarms on my phone. And the alarm would say something different every time. Breathe. Stand, walk outside, say thank you, hug your child, just things. Because I knew I was in so deep that I would be needing to get pulled out every hour, if not every half hour, of being in some sort of headstorm that was not going to be productive. And I trained myself to do that. And when I was starting to feel better after many months, I made it every 2 hours. And then the alarm switched to every 3 hours. And this became a real ritual. And there was one Saturday, I'm sitting with my husband and the alarm went off. And my husband goes, what are we grateful for now? And I was like, the kids are playing together. Like, it didn't have to be anything big, but I needed to find the good in what was going on in my life because I had so much stress. So for that person that's in that, there are ways that you can find what am I grateful for in this very moment? Because I think what really drove that, Tosca, is that I took advantage of so many things that I thought would never be taken from me. My happiness was aligned to my sense of safety, and my sense of safety was aligned to money. And I took advantage of the money. And I didn't know that I did that. I didn't know that I took for granted that I could pay my bills, and that I took for granted that I had health insurance, and that I took for granted that I had a job and I had these securities. I took advantage and for granted. And I was so afraid that the other things that were valuable to me were also going to be taken for granted, like my ability to breathe, my ability to walk, my ability to anything, literally anything. So I wanted to be grateful for all of it while I had it, because I never knew when I would not have it.
Well, and I just, I so appreciate you sharing your story. And I know that this is part and parcel to what you do and how you help people see themselves and find a path forward. And, what I just want to honor for those watching or listening is that you found that one small micro step by listening to yourself. That and I think that we have a tendency to want other people to tell us what to do. It's like, just tell me what I got to, and I don't know. In the work, in doing this work for many years, it's like the guidance from within. And even if it might feel like a whisper or it might feel insignificant, like, trust it. So I'm hoping that whoever's listening to this, it's not loud. It's not like, hey, Stacy,
no, it was a
gratitude
whisper.
practice is going to be like, no, it's really subtle, right?
It was a whisper, and it basically was just a whisper that said, say thank you.
And you went just all in on that. You were like, okay, and went
agreed, like so aggressively in. People were like, you did what? I'm like, but it saved me. It put my focus towards the things that mattered.
Yeah.
Because I had so many things in my life that were such big deals. And I needed to find a way to really focus on what truly, truly mattered in my life that I couldn't bear be taken away.
And I think that, we, so much of this conversation and even this podcast, right, is like, how do we get unstuck, and how do we, and it often comes down to that recognition of something that we already know. And you may only know one thing for you, right? Like, you knew about thank you. And so you followed that and you followed that. And my guess is, as you went down your path, then you received more whispers, and that opened more things. Yeah. So I think that, again, in this world in which we want instant gratification, we want instant results, this work of transformation, this work of up-leveling our life, this work of finding new possible destinations, not only for our internal experience, but for our external realities, that the small things over time, that makes the difference. And even today, right? In all of the work that I've done on myself, and will continue to do until the day I die, is every time I get confused, every time I get overwhelmed, every time I feel like I have no effing idea what the next thing is, I have to get quiet and cut out the noise so that I can listen to myself. And I'm curious if this is this is kind of one tip, right? Like, what are those micro things? Like, this episode's probably going to launch in the first of the year, right? People want this year to be different, or this next chapter. What are the other steps that feel manageable that folks can take in this arena of getting unstuck, and honoring oneself, and wanting something different?
I mean, honestly, the word that's coming to my head, you talk about a whisper, right? Is get curious. Curiosity doesn't cost anything. And I'm really sensitive to the story that you shared about a single mom that feels so burdened, because it's a reality for so many people. And, I got very curious and had a lot less resource available to me 13 years ago than is available today. I can't imagine what I would have learned if I had access to some of the writings and the podcasts. I mean, podcasts didn't exist. YouTube really wasn't a thing. There was barely even Instagram really wasn't even out in 2012. So I was really just grasping for what I could maybe find at a library or that somebody told me about. The way things have changed in the last 13, 14, 15 years is pretty extraordinary. So getting curious is a low cost, no cost entry point. And you have a lot of access to a lot of things I did not have. So when you can easily Google the things that you're struggling with and ask for a podcast about it, Ask for a YouTube clip about it. Ask for somebody to follow. Ask for a book recommendation. You'll get it. It's incredible how you can use technology to figure these things out.
That's such beautiful advice because, right, we're often aware of, we have some awareness of something, whether it's, I'm just feeling anxious all the time. You know, why do I continue to bang my head against the wall because I don't understand why so-and-so is treating me this way or this, right? So if we slow down and say, what is it that we're aware of that's present and form a question around it, to your point, like you will find a way. That is a beautiful pathway.
Yeah. And you can get curious. You can ask the internet anything and you'll get the information. It's crazy. I used it to learn a lot of things about myself, other people, where I don't even have the understanding or the information. And I'm trying to understand what is it that I'm looking at.
I use this too. Like, for example, like, you know, I may feel like there's something that's beneficial to a client. Like, let's just say, like a cord cutting meditation, for example, right? And I will say, Google it, right? Or like, look it up on YouTube. And I say that because I think it's more powerful for your intuition to find a resource, for your energetic. Of course, I have recommendations too in this, but I think that more often than not, it's like, if this is something that's resonant, then you being in the search of it can help you stumble upon something that I may never have stumbled upon that was exactly right for you. Right. So part of it is that self-trust of saying like, look, I 100% for those that have that desire and resource, like get support, you know, and in whatever facet that looks like, whether that's a coach, whether that's, you know, a therapist, whether that's whatever modality, but to honor like, hey, if you're somehow you heard the word Reiki, you know, and you're like, your body's very curious, like trust that, because that is also a whisper. And I know we're coming closer to time, but like that reminds me of like the somatic piece of all this, because we're talking about very psychological things and how our, you know, our mindset and what we're thinking about. But tell me more about your perspective on the somatic piece, the body piece of this work of getting unstuck, of processing our past.
I think, you know, in my space as a trauma care practitioner, I'm very, very aware that unprocessed trauma manifests in the body physically. There's no question about it. And it is not uncommon. I have in my intake form, I don't know, a dozen different conditions that I see on a consistent basis on my intake form for people to check off. And they're always checking them off. And they're very rooted in autoimmune. And there is just too much research and too much study out there now to show the correlation between unresolved emotional, psychological, mental experiences and physical problems. And again, I've got 2 books. There are some very, very good books out there by very, very well-known people, mostly doctors that have turned trauma specialists because they were willing to call it out and see it. It hasn't necessarily caught up yet with training of medical doctors, though I'm hoping the curriculums will change. But there is a deep correlation between unresolved experiences and physical manifestations of that. And what's interesting is, I mentioned earlier, I've been diagnosed with 3 autoimmune conditions. So the 3 autoimmune conditions that I've been diagnosed with are endometriosis, Raynaud's syndrome, which I've had since I was 16 years old, and seronegative rheumatoid arthritis. What I'm going to say is that, how do I want to put this? What I learned through that experience of having these multiple diagnoses is that we need to kind of simultaneously do like a double dip of like getting to the root of what is the pain that still needs to be healed, and then also doing something to physically heal it. When I'm working with people and they say, but my numbers show, but my blood level's different, so it can't be trauma. But, you know, the scope showed X, so it can't be trauma. I just have to say, but it is. And you have to find, if it's something you're curious about, you have to really do a lot of work to find a practitioner that's willing to learn that and understand that, or read. And I can give you more books that you can put in the show notes. One is called The Myth. Yeah, one is called The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate. And the other one is a new book that just came out this year called The Biology of Trauma by Dr. Amy Epigen. I'm so grateful that they're putting these things into writing, because as trauma specialists, we see it and we know it. And it becomes extra trauma for the person that's carrying it, because they feel like their body's failing them. But what's happening is their body's just carrying something that's too heavy to carry. And its nervous system and its immune system is breaking down. So it's increasing the likelihood that these things are going to happen, right? Or that, and so what I would say is get, again, curious. So when I was diagnosed, the last one I was diagnosed with was rheumatoid arthritis. It was seronegative rheumatoid arthritis in 2021. I was 47 years old. And, you know, right away, she's offering me steroids because that would be the normal protocol. But I had the whisper and I knew, okay, maybe you just have more layers of things to resolve. Because I'd been in therapy on and off since I was 12 years old. And at that age, I was 47. And I'd probably been in and out of therapy for about 30 years. And in the last 5 years, I had started working with a hypnotherapist and a coach and really learned things I had never learned with my therapists. So I took a somatic approach. I went and found someone that I knew that was trauma trained as an acupuncturist. And I doubled down, and I recognized this was costly, but now, you know, I just came out of a very financially distraught situation. So I'm not taking this lightly, but I'm also very aware at that time how important this was. And I was willing to make other sacrifices in my life to make sure I could get this acupuncture. I went to acupuncture 2 to 3 times a week, and I put the seronegative rheumatoid arthritis into remission. The amount of emotion that came off of me on the table was intense. When we are in stillness, things will come clear. And I have been somebody that's always moved, always kept busy, always doing, you know, and part of it's just because I have a lot of ideas and I'm very creative, but there was also a real survival tactic to that. When I got still on the table, and my acupuncturist just has this amazing capability of like legitimately getting my nervous system so restful that I almost feel like I'm levitating out of my body. Like I feel separate from my body. I've never experienced that in any other way. In that space, I understood things I couldn't gain access to. And the one big thing that I heard, and it was a whisper, was you were never alone. I was always with you. And how I interpreted that, because I know my own story, is through all the things I experienced, I felt so alone. I had never told that to anybody. I didn't even really know it. Like I knew it unconsciously, but I never really put that into words. But that spoke to me when I heard that. You were never alone. I was always with you. And what I heard was my body never left me. Through everything I experienced, my body was always the protector. It was always bracing itself. And it was tired and it was exhausted and it was hurt. And it couldn't hold it for me anymore. But I could also hold it for myself now. You know, it's like a part almost. It's like I needed that when I was 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. But here I am at 48. And in that moment, I just burst into tears on the table. And I just started saying, thank you. And I got it. I got this message. I understand it. And now I will give back to you. And I will love my body and I will love myself. And I will take care of you now. You took care of me. I will take care of you. And I eventually took such good care of my body. I was able to get this rheumatoid arthritis under wraps and kind of into this remission state. But the reality is that my body was screaming in pain, and my body was extremely fatigued. And from that pain, the physical pain and the emotional pain that still had yet to be released. So I really do just know from my own personal experience, there's so many somatic modalities. For me, acupuncture has always been one I've leaned towards. Yoga, breath work, qigong, tai chi. Like there's so many things that can be done. I couldn't even list them all in a podcast. But doing it in tandem with getting quiet or having somebody hold space for you or doing this emotional work is the key. Doing it without it is not as effective, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because we have to understand why the body is braced to begin with. And we need the body to feel safe enough to let go.
I love that you share this part of your story. I really appreciate it. I think that, to your point, right, the medical world that we live in, right, doesn't go there with folks. It doesn't, right? It's here's the pill, here's the whatever. And I will just corroborate with you and say, yeah, like somatic work has been a part of my journey. I did a lot of craniosacral therapy work.
Oh, that's so good. I love craniosacral.
Yeah, and I have done acupuncture in different arenas.
Good.
And what I want to just highlight for the folks listening and watching is that, look, if it feels hard, if it feels hard, right, to even enter that space because it just feels feel so overwhelming, then get on a table, right? That table could be a massage, that table could be acupuncture, where there's a lot of releasing that can be done without even mentally processing what you're releasing. And that was my experience, like on the table, was just like, I don't know what's being released, but I'm crying, but like my body feels something. And I think it's different for everybody. And that drove me crazy because I'm somebody who wants to understand, which is why I started reading like Peter Levine, work, but I say this to say like that for some folks, it may not be a whisper. It may be within the body that is making noise, and that noise might be a sensation. That noise might be a pain. And so get to your point about the message you've been sharing this whole time, which is get curious about that. And what does it need? And even if you have no idea, like I remember one time, it was just like early on in my journey, I was in a store and I walked by this, jade necklace, and it was yellow, and it was like, said something about like the solar plexus, right? Now I had no idea about chakras at that time. And when I did I happened to find a practitioner, and I say, I don't know what I need. I don't know what's going on, but I feel like it might have something to do with my solar plexus. And oh, by the way, the solar plexus is where willpower is, right? That's right. So I had this knowing, but I didn't know, and so I say it could come up even in physical things that you're drawn toward. Trust it, honor it, follow the path, follow the curiosity of that, and see where it takes you. I think that's where the magic is in the healing journey, I think. And Stacey, thank you so much. I feel like we need part 2, 3, 4, but like, thank you for sharing so much depth in this relatively short period of time, giving so many resources. Everything will be in the show notes. And so my 2 last questions for you. Number 1, is there anything that you want to say that hasn't been said, something that you feel like, I want to say this? And the second piece is, what is the easiest way to find you, your resources, and where you reside?
Yeah. So I think, the thing I always like to leave people with is this concept of people will verbalize this idea of I'm so broken. And I just want people to understand no one's broken. You've just adapted to life in a way that's no longer working for you. And that's okay. Because once you can recognize this is no longer working for me, then you can look at what those adaptations are and you can course correct. And it's really that simple. No one's inherently defective in any way, shape, or form. And so that's number one. Number two is honestly, I think the best way for people to find me, because you'll get to get more of this, is my Instagram. And my Instagram is just my name, Stacy Uhrig. It's StacyUhrig. And I use my Instagram solely as a psychoeducational platform. I put a lot of time into creating a lot of content to really allow you to gain awareness again about who you are, how you're ticking. And from there, you can always reach me on my website. All the links are right on my Instagram. My website is flipyourmindset.com. But Instagram's a good place. Just go and follow so you get updated on everything. And you can always, DM me through there. I will always respond.
Amazing. Gosh, I'm so thrilled. Thank you for your time, for your energy, for your sharing your stories. And I am just excited for what's possible for us as we continue our journeys and doing this work. And and I'm excited for new possibilities 2026. Like change is possible. Anything is possible for your life.
Yeah.
It's taking those little actions towards something new. So thank you for the inspiration, the resources, and I look forward to more conversations.
Thank you so much. I love it. As you can tell, I could legitimately jam out on this all day, every day.
Well, thank you so much.